First of all, thanks for taking the time out of your schedules to join us this morning or this afternoon, wherever you're calling from. We really appreciate your time, thought, and input as part of our technical advisory committee on ProWash and Scale's planning and our activities and just your thoughts in general. With that being said, again, just as a reminder, if people could, there should be in the meeting chat a sign-in sheet, and if you could go to page 2 and sign in, and if your name's not on the list, please add at the bottom your name so that we can be sure to follow up after the meeting with the materials and kind of as a post-meeting survey, questions and comments, and ask for your input. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and get started. I think, Bella, if you could do the next slide. Yep. So for those who are interested in interpretation in another language, there should be at the bottom of your screen a little globe situation where it says interpretation in English. And if you click that, you should be able to choose French as another option. So if people are interested in listening in this in French, that would be, please use this situation. Bella, if you could do the next slide, that would be great. So today's agenda, what we're really going to focus on, this was the initial welcome. We're going to focus in on ProWash and Scale's Year 2 work plan highlights. We're going to have a short question and answer kind of for major pending issues or questions or input that you would like to provide. We're happy to have any input and thoughts and suggestions that you have on our Year 2 work plan. Then we're going to have a 10-minute, 10 to 15-minute presentation on environmental safeguarding from BHA, and then we're going to break out into breakout discussions by technical sector. So there will be one on WASH and one on agriculture, natural resource management, and markets. And then that's going to be 20 to 25 minutes, and then we're going to close up into one big group and do next steps and feedback, and that should get us to the hour. So this is what our agenda for the next hour looks like together. We value any and all input that you have, so please feel free to share any thoughts or comments. So with that being said, if you could go to the next slide. So this is we're just going to kind of do a quick poll here to kind of think through initially of how familiar we are with ProWash and Scale and kind of what sectors we are. So just go through this poll that should show up on your screen in terms of thinking through what technical sectors that ProWash and Scale supports. As background kind of on ProWash and Scale, we are the combination of the previous ProWash and Scale awards. It's funded by USAID BHA. And it's we're approaching Year 2, right? We're in Year 2 right now, and we go through the end of February 2027. It's implemented by Mercy Corps and Save the Children. So if you can think through our technical sectors here, I think we can give a couple more seconds for those who are still filling it out. But once we do that, we will go to the next slide to kind of go through what this looks like in practice. So I think for now, Bella, I think we can go initially to the next slide. Perfect. So this is what our technical sectors look like. We have WASH, Integrated Water Resource Management, Markets and Livelihoods, Agriculture and Natural Resource Management. And really the overall goal of the ProWash and Scale Award is to kind of enhance the impact, sustainability, and scalability of BHA-funded food and nutrition activities in emergency, early recovery, risk reduction, and resilience settings. So this is kind of across the board with BHA programming. We're really looking to enhance the impact sustainability across these technical sectors. And how we do this on a variety of topics, and we'll kind of explore this a little bit more in our Year 2 work plan, but we do this through capacity strengthening and localization, applied research, adaptation, and knowledge management, and then we also help on collaboration and coordination. So those are the three, and we can focus, if we go to our next slide, that should be our highlight of our Year 3 work plan. So if you could switch to the next slide, perfect, of our Year 2 work plan. Okay, so initially, this is kind of our top level, what we're trying to do in year 2. So we're going to continue building on what we've done in year 1 in terms of peer groups. We've just started 4 peer learning groups, which we'll discuss kind of on the next slide. We also provide one-on-one and support on a variety of technical areas, which you saw on the last slide. And we're also really kind of this year doing a big push on local partners and really supporting local partners, whether it's attend trainings or kind of just report out what they've learned and researched. We also have a big priority in year 2 on applied research. We aim to do 3 large RFAs by the end of the year, and we've put out kind of 2. We are in the process, and we will be putting out 2 RFAs, and we're working on the 3rd. Another big priority for us in year 2 is connecting stakeholders. So that would be kind of communities of practice, that would be the cluster working groups. And then throughout all of this, we're going to be learning and adapting. So next slide, please. Yep, perfect. Okay, perfect. So our purpose 1 here. So this is just top level. I'm not going to go through each of these, but this is top level what we're thinking this year in terms of capacity strengthening and localization. So that includes webinars, that includes these 4 peer learning groups that we mentioned. There's one on water, sanitation, climate, and natural resource management. We also are aiming this year to support local partners to attend trainings and conferences, and we're going to be providing capacity building support. So what does that look like? Examples, we've done HCD for WASH, and kind of we anticipate doing a market systems development foundations course also piloting this year. Just as what kind of we're trying to do in year 2, these are just some selected targets here that by the end of year 2, we want to do 30 capacity strengthening events. So with that, I think I'll leave it open for if you have any questions or comments or thoughts on this, please enter in our chat, any kind of top level. I'll go to the next purpose, kind of move us along, but this is perfect. So this is just to get a sense of what we did in year 1. These are kind of the RIFSA partners that we reached out to and we put their input in our year 1, and we also anticipate reaching out and hopefully working with them as we move forward in year 2. But I just wanted to show kind of a breadth of the countries and the regions and the resilience food securities, particularly in this case, that we're working with and we anticipate hopefully working with as we move forward. Yeah, so if you could do the next slide, please. Perfect. So this is our second purpose. And I'm just going to really skip quickly over this, but the main idea here in terms of our applied research adaptation and knowledge management is we're really supporting existing activities that the cluster and other partners are doing, and we're really trying to amplify what's happening. So this would include kind of working on seed system security assessment, supporting the WASH roadmap, really helping existing tools and resources, and really also linking with communities of practice and such as the markets in crisis, kind of to really help build out their and our reach in terms of local partners and activities. We also anticipate, as mentioned, reaching out 3 applied research. We have one is looking at the sustainability and closed resilience food security activities, particularly related to our technical sector. The second RFA is centering community voices. And the third, we're still drafting, and we anticipate it kind of on climate resilience and humanitarian context. This is still being drafted, but we will be sharing with you as we kind of roll out. We also anticipate this year kind of looking at humanitarian deep dives and kind of continuing our support on research and learning across the resilience food security activities. So with that, I will go to our last purpose. And this is kind of coordination and collaboration. So this is kind of to build on what people are doing and kind of linking together to make more sustainable activities and communities of practice moving forward. So what does this look like in practice? So as part of our year 2, we're going to be working with kind of the clusters and twigs in terms of moving humanitarian forward. We're also going to be working with Ideal and Associate Awards, including this is an example of how we're going to be working with the Gender and Youth Associate Award, that's Gaia, on the Cultivate Fellowship. And we also anticipate working with CDC and NGOs on emergency drinking water quality. And we're also going to kind of continue working on with other kind of communities practice, as mentioned, the markets in crisis during this year. So with that being said, I wanted to leave it open for any kind of high level question and comments on our year 2 work plan. So that's what it looks like right now. You don't have to have any comments now. We will be asking again, but I just wanted to leave the floor open. There's kind of high level thoughts or questions that we can address now. Yes, and I see a comment in the chat that in the DRC, yes, we're going to be adding that because we're just now having initial calls, and we will be working with the RIFs in the DRC moving forward. So we will be updating that. Thanks for flagging.
There's a question, Julia, from in the Q&A. Can you say more about the project's involvement in the Gender Fellowship?
Oh, sorry, I do not see the Q&A. Perfect. Yeah, so I think, yeah, so this is, I think this is referring to the Gaia to Pro-Wash and Scales kind of linkages with the Gaia Award and the Gender Fellowship. So I think we will, as part of the Cultivate Gaia Fellowship, Pro-Wash and Scale will be involved in kind of, will be involved in the Zimbabwe kind of lessons learned. And I think Nicole actually Jess is not on this call, right? But we do have a staff member who is going to be participating and involved in that fellowship.
Yeah, our WASH research and learning advisor, who has a strong expertise in gender and WASH and inclusion, is supporting both throughout the in-person component in Zimbabwe, as well as coaching and follow-up on if there are research questions that participants prioritize that are related to water, sanitation, hygiene.
Perfect. Thanks. And I see, the meaning of the word RIFSA, I'm sorry. That is the Resilience Food Security Activity. And those are the larger USAID Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance funded activities in a variety of countries, mostly in Africa. Okay. Yes, Jess noted. We will include you in the CRS conversations moving forward. For ag, I'm assuming ag, livelihoods, environmental. Yeah. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay. With that said, I think I will turn it over to the next speaker, on to for BHA to talk through initially framing on environmental safeguarding. So I will turn off. Thanks.
With many thanks, Jessica. Forgive me, colleagues, I'm a little not as adept in Zoom, and so forgive me if I'm a little stilted here. So good day to all. It's wonderful to see you all. And thank you so much to the PWS Pro Wash and Scale project, as well as to Christy Tabai and Precious Sancho, my colleagues here in the Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance, for this this excellent opportunity to engage with you all. My name is Erica Closeri. I'm with BHA, Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance. I serve as the Bureau Environmental Officer and Climate Integration Lead. I've been with USAID working at this interface between environment, climate, and humanitarian assistance. Actually, this is my 20th year, and so quite exciting for me. And I really appreciate this opportunity to touch upon this concept of environmental safeguarding. As you can see in the title that I've presented here, this concept of the greening of humanitarian assistance, that is that's an increasing use as a term of art for thinking about these environmental determinants, the related climate determinants. As you can see in my subtitle, equitably reducing environmental and climate risks. So you'll see me touch upon some of those, all of those types of concepts. And again, my title is both looking at the remit of environmental safeguarding, absolutely in this space, but also we broadly conceive aspects of integration of climate risks in this space, and as evidenced by my dual-hatted nature of my position. As you may know, USAID has a series of Bureau Environmental Officers, or BEOs, around the agency, a series of Climate Integration Leads, or CILs, trying to define some of my acronyms here in the many. And so I work in counterpart with mission environmental officers in every bilateral mission across the agency. And in most cases, and in many cases, those mission environmental officers, just like myself, are also the climate integration leads. And so I want to kind of present out that dual-hatted nature of environment and climate. Yes, again, as you can see, I'm in the Office of Budget and counterpart office to my colleagues in the Technical and Program Quality Office. Next slide, please. So, and if we can just kind of push the return. There's a couple of little arrows that kind of show up, but this is again just to reinforce this vision. Oh, pardon me. Yeah, thank you. This vision of environmental safeguarding. It's really encompasses the way that I am looking at it through my portfolio of, again, looking at environmental impacts coupled with the climate risks. You really can't separate them, right? Communities who we're privileged to partner with, they don't see things that, well, this is environment, this is climate, etc. It's land, it's air, it's water, and these are all connected. And so we broadly bring these aspects together. Environmental impacts, of course, the extent of a climate risk will have a tremendous amount to do with how resilient the environmental resources are. Is it hard-packed soil, lateritic soil, Niger, for example, or is it a more forested area that can absorb those shocks, for example? The concept of equity and justice, or environmental justice, climate equity, that is increasingly part of how we look at this work as well, in close consultation. I'm glad to see all of the work here in Pro Wash and Scale, of course, your excellence in gender, age, and social inclusion, in these concepts of environmental equity, climate justice, etc. We're very much forefront, as BHA was very much involved in the development of our climate strategy to find equitable, ambitious action against climate change. So that piece of equity and justice is critical. And then looking down on supply chains, right? So we're looking at these environmental and climate risks, pollution, greening, if you will, for our programs as well as for our operations. So that includes our supply chain, that includes our logistics, our Title II food assistance, our non-food assistance, you know, the carbon emissions, the greenhouse gas emissions associated with those supply chains. The supply chains have some of the largest greenhouse gas emissions of any part of our work. And certainly we are participating on, for example, the Climate Action Accelerator. Our Deputy Assistant Administrator within BHA, Ms. Marcia Wong, is a participant in the Climate Action Accelerator, really looking what we can do as or the pesticides piece, right? Clear environmental impacts, et cetera, associated with that, clear climate disease move with different temperature and climate regimes. Pesticides operate differently in different temperature, climate regimes, et cetera. With apologies, colleagues, I turned off my camera just to preserve bandwidth. Next slide, please. So I just have a handful of slides here. I think there's maybe just 2 or 3 more after this because we're really keen to hear from you all. But we really think of this broadly within this concept of really transformation of the humanitarian sector from many different perspectives. It can be a digital transformation, but the place that we're also focused on here is this concept of, you know, the climate crisis is a humanitarian crisis. The humanitarian crisis is rooted in climate crisis, for example. And certainly we have been very inspired and enthused by the action taken on the Climate and Environment Charter for humanitarian organizations that many of your NGOs have signed on. We have 380 and growing, at least 380 humanitarian organizations have signed on to this charter, and also 13 donors where the US government signed on as the second supporter of this charter. And this has sent an important message colleagues across the humanitarian development and peace nexus that humanitarian organizations have a critical role to play in this coupled climate and environmental crisis, working at the front lines, partnering with communities, having in-depth knowledge of the networks and the knowledge that these communities bring to bear to help fight these crises. Together is how we'll be able to address these crises. So really just in that broad transformation and the significant efforts. Again, this charter, as many of you know, was led by IFRC and ICRC. Next slide, please. And the next slide. So very, very top level to some of you policies. I'll talk about this and then one other policy. We won't get into great depth, but certainly more than happy to as questions arise. And just to again bring to people's forefront this concept of USAID's climate strategy in the environmental piece, methods, looking at climate risk management, certainly looking at greenhouse gas emissions, looking at the importance of equitable and ambitious climate action. We're very, very cognizant within the humanitarian community that efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, frankly, efforts to improve environmental resiliency, can do harm if they're not considered equitably, working with communities, engaging the voices of those that have been disenfranchised and marginalized and not part of economic and political processes. This climate strategy was very, very active. Sorry, BHA, our humanitarian assistance colleagues, were very active in the crafting of this strategy, and indeed this concept of humanitarian centering people in the midst of our climate response to the climate crisis, helping center people in the midst of that. So not just greenhouse gas emissions, because a person could reduce greenhouse gas emissions and actually do harm by displacing people from their lands as the global north looks towards the global south for opportunities. And so to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So that concept of just transition is something that is very much central to this work as well. And next slide, please. And then certainly I don't need to reiterate to this group here the importance of localization, and certainly this is a huge priority for us as an agency, this kind of climate and localization and the work that we're doing towards this space. And again, our work in environmental safeguarding and reducing climate risks, et cetera, is all foundational. And again, we're really focused on that local and equitable piece. One can work in a local setting without, or what one could disrupt or reinforce structural inequalities. And so that concept of localization in that equitable and proactive, respecting the sovereignty of communities in countries is really central to our vision in localization as well. Next slide, please. And that's it. So I wanted to again thank you all, merci mille fois, for this opportunity. And yeah, happy to turn it back to you, Julia, and hear what our colleagues have to say. And yeah, again, I welcome this opportunity. Thank you again.
Thanks, Erica. I really appreciate your time and sharing this with us. I think with that, what we're going to be doing for the next 20 or so minutes is breaking out into breakout discussions, particularly on environmental safeguarding, and kind of grounding this into how have people kind of implemented this in the field. So we've kind of developed 3 guiding questions on this. And so what we're requesting is that if people kind of choose which sector that you're interested in discussing more. So if you're interested in agriculture, natural resource management, or even markets, please stay in this main room. And if you're interested in WASH, kind of water, please go into breakout room 1. And so in order to do that, if you're interested in WASH, please go into the breakout rooms, which should be at the bottom of kind of your Zoom in the middle, bottom middle, and you could be able to click join a breakout room, and then you can do breakout room 1, WASH. So with that, we request that people please join by interest the breakout rooms. Those who do not join will be staying in this main room for agriculture and natural resource management, and we'll be discussing these 3 questions on the screen. I think we'll give a couple seconds for people to join, and then kick this one off. Does that seem okay, Jen? We kick it off in a minute or so.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. Oh yeah, people have started to shift.
Okay. Right. I'm trying to people have started.
When you're in the main room, it's a little hard to know.
That's exactly what I'm trying to figure out. People shifted or no?
It looks like they have. I can see the numbers down to 16. So
Okay.
all right. So I know we have a limited time. I think we have about 20 minutes. Is that right, Julia?
Yes, exactly. We have 20 minutes, and then we'll kind of break out together to kind of do top level, and then we'll close end the meeting. So we have about 20 minutes for this.
Okay, then I would just remind folks who have stayed in this room, we still have French interpretation available here in this main room. So feel free to follow along in your preferred language. I'm dropping the link to the sign-in sheet again, only because if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll see a space for taking notes and making your additions on this topic under breakout group 2, which is environmental safeguarding in agriculture and NRM. And so this is very informal, led by all of us together. If you would like to come off mute and share your thoughts. I'll be taking notes. If you would like to put your thoughts directly into this notes document, you'll see that each question has sort of got its own little box. And you can also use the name column if you'd like to, attribute yourself to your comment, which is nice because then we can also, if you've got questions, we know who raised it, and we can follow up with you on anything specific. So up to you, but you can use that name column as well. And if you're struggling with this document at all, just feel free to put your thoughts in the chat, come off mute, whatever works best for you. So I think let's tackle this first question. And we're really just curious to know from folks what challenges you may have run into in implementing environmental safeguarding in these technical sectors specific to agriculture and NRM. And maybe to kind of unpack that a little, like beyond just the challenge, like what about it was challenging? And was there anything that would have helped at that time to make it less challenging? And we're also just sort of interested broadly in if you have reflections on differences between development and emergency programming when it comes to this question. So those are sort of the prompts around that first big question around challenges to implementation of environmental safeguarding. I'll pause there, and if anybody would like to come off mute, feel free. Just keeping an eye on, see if anyone is unmuting themselves. Okay, Larry, go ahead.
Thank you. I was curious with respect to the category of pesticides use in emergency situations, humanitarian assistance. Does the project actually do operations that require that kind of environmental compliance?
I might throw that to the group. I think there's a variety. Certainly many of the RIFSAs, for instance, that ProWash and Scale have consulted with or engaged with over this past year, have incorporated things like pesticide safety and training and monitoring and compliance with those aspects of the requirements or guidelines. But if anybody has anything specific to share to Larry's question about pesticide use.
Jen, would you like me to jump in here, or would we rather hear from colleagues?
Either or. If people don't have their own experiences from implementation of on this type of activity, I would be very happy to hear from Erica too to set the scene.
Just very briefly, but yeah, as Jen noted, certainly within the resilience food security activities, as well as within emergency response activities, anywhere from pesticide treated seeds to insecticide treated bed nets, to fumigation of food aid commodities within warehouses. Yeah, there's and of course field application that tends to be more so on the longer term programming when you're in those kind of seeds and tools, more emergency response. Increasingly, we absolutely have seen the uptick in the use of seeds that are coated with pesticides to kind of address some of the pre-emergent pest issues before the plant grows, if you will. Yes, and indeed, as Jessica noted, the pesticide evaluation report and safe use action plan, or PERSWAP, as it says, is that the cumbersome acronym indicates, absolutely is something that by and large, especially in the emergency setting, USAID is having those types of resources available for partners. This is something that is changing over time, especially in that, for example, pesticide treated seed space. We have kind of a global PERSWAP that we have developed in consultation and partnership with our agriculture colleagues here within BHA. I'll stop there, but lots more to talk. And may I ask for colleagues to maybe introduce themselves, or when you're asking a question, maybe just to say where you're coming from. Forgive me, would be very helpful. Thank you. Oh.
Yeah, thank you, Erica. That was a useful response. I was particularly interested in the fact of whether the PERSWAP, there was a project-wide, worldwide PERSWAP for ProWash and Scale, or if individual country activities had to have their own. So the example you gave was very interesting. And to answer your question, I work at the Center for International Research, Education, and Development at Virginia Tech. And within that, I used to be the associate director of the Integrated Pest Management Innovation Lab. That's why I had a particular interest in the pesticides. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Yeah, happy to have any further discussions in this space, Larry. Absolutely. Thank you, colleague.
I'm seeing another comment that was added directly to the notes document. GHG accounting can sometimes be a challenging topic to build staff capacity in, and available tools can be clunky. Does anybody share that a thought, or have anything they'd like to add to that, or talk about how it might be improved or made easier?
If I may, Jen, and forgive me, maybe I'll pause a little bit more. Forgive me. I'm happy to comment as these go on, but perhaps Jen, is your role of moderator. I'll let you. I'll have something to say on probably most of these comments. And so forgive me. I don't want to overwhelm by speaking too much though as well. So.
Sorry, I'm just going to turn off my camera because I think I'm having a bit of an internet dip. I think it's okay. I'm not hearing, let's see, I see Juliana is noting that the use of phosphine fumigation gas entitled to emergency commodities, that's a difficulty.
Yep, apologies. No, just noting as another example, I help support Erica's portfolio. Just wanted to add to the examples of pesticide use. That was all.
Okay, got you. And then, sorry, Jess, I missed your question that the PERSWAP is part of the IEE for each individual organization. I think that's been covered already in the previous discussion. And Erica, feel free. It's okay, especially if people don't have anything to add to. Yeah.
No. Absolutely, and I really appreciate this this conversation, or this question. And if the colleague who asked, forgive me, do we know who asked the question or put it in?
Yeah.
That would actually be quite helpful. Yeah.
Yes, it's me. It's Tanner Oark. I'm the Senior Technical Advisor for Sustainable Livelihoods and Resilience at World Vision. And I just kind of put that comment in because I know even at previous organizations, it was something we struggled with was, we wanted to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but the measurement of that and really quantifying that in a way that was like true could tend to be a challenge. And then when we looked at different tools available, they were either incredibly scientific or not scientific at all. So kind of trying to find the balance between that is something I've seen challenging.
Tanner, many thanks for this excellent point. And indeed, we're looking towards, for example, some kind of almost just like some best practices, things that we know are going to reduce without frankly counting. Forgive me, I want to kind of go in that kind of a space. We are starting up work in collaboration with DG ECHO, with the European Union, on looking at emissions in humanitarian supply chains. Certainly USAID has a lot of work that we're doing, reducing our emissions in terms of the different carbon accounting approaches, etc. I know that there are some common approaches, as I noted in the Climate and Environment Humanitarian Charter, but I think through this avenue and others, really getting some of those clear statements back. I don't know if colleagues are familiar with the Climate Action Accelerator that is being launched and looking at some of these spaces, but this is extremely valuable feedback. But like I said, some common tools are in the charter. BHA is starting up more specific work. We've done some previous work with the MIT Lincoln laboratories in this space, but we'd love to get more feedback from you all, kind of at the front lines and the fence lines, and some of the challenges you're seeing here. Thank you so much.
Okay, I think we're starting to run a little bit short on time, so I think if it's okay, we might shift to the second question. And that's more about sort of like, okay, there's compliance, there's the tools, there's challenges with some of these tools, and yet then how, once compliance has been sort of like managed, how is this like reflected in program implementation? And to unpack that a little bit, maybe some wicked type questions around, you know, is the principle of do no harm and meeting requirements enough to really ensure environmental safeguarding in programs? And what are some of the best practices you've seen? Kind of touching on some of what Erica presented on earlier around community rights and sort of action around safeguarding the environment that's an inclusive lens to real environmental safeguarding. Do people have thoughts on that question? Again, you can just put it straight in the document if you like, or come off mute or use the chat. But just thinking about how compliance is then reflected in implementation.
Hey, Jen, I had my hand up for a while and I'm
Oh,
gonna
sorry, Jess. Sorry, I'm toggling
Okay.
between too many
Hi.
screens. My bad.
No worries, no worries. It's all good. So my name is Jess Dittmer. Sorry, I'm not on camera today because I don't feel presentable today. But I'm a regional technical advisor for CRS in the Central Africa Regional Office for agriculture, livelihoods, and climate change. I have a comment on the second one, but I also have a comment on the first one and the two topics we discussed briefly. So maybe I quickly start with them with one sentence or two sentences each. I think in regards to the pesticides, I can remember, but this is a long time ago, that we had back in the Amashiga DFAB in Burundi, so really long time ago. This is when fall armyworm hit, and we had to use pesticides. We usually discourage the use of pesticides across CRS. But obviously there is some cases where we have to, unfortunately, and back then it was one of those cases. And I remember, and this is to your first question, that we had actually challenges to get that approved. And I don't know if those approvals are now swifter nowadays, but it took quite a while until we were actually able to, by BHA cleared, or back then it was Food for Peace, I guess. So to have that cleared. So not sure how that is today, and if anybody has something to add, we can also discuss that offline, maybe. And then to the other piece around the greenhouse gas accounting, I feel for operations side, I feel it's actually quite accurate. At least I can speak about CRS, and we have done a huge baseline for our operations side, including we are also trying to tackling supply chain, and that's quite difficult, but obviously it is a huge importance because we are still importing quite a bit of commodities into the different countries. But what I'm struggling with is a little bit on that programming side, and I want to flag a question here. So programming that is not vehicles, etc., right? So because that falls more under operations. And there was last year, or maybe the year before, there was potentially it was an RFI for some revival of a USAID tool that had been developed maybe 10 years ago, and I have to dig that out actually in my emails, and I can do so. I think I have it. We didn't respond to this, but it was about a greenhouse gas emission tool in programming, and maybe it rings a bell for you, Christy. I'm not sure, or for Erica. No, okay. I'll dig it out if I can find it and send it to Jen, and she can share. So, because that's really difficult, right? To really understand what we are emitting through the farmers we're working with, or through the people in general we're working with. And I think that's maybe something we want to discuss more. And then for question 2, I have, I think other donors, and I'm speaking about some EU donors, they have quite, so they have their compliance pieces you have to do before you start a project. And then they have a yearly review, or an annual review around these compliance documents that they have to submit before. And where they really look at actions they have been doing within the programs to decrease risks and to really comply to what they were promising through the initial assessments. And I think that is probably something that I don't know if that is now a thing also I haven't really seen anything alike within US8, but I think that could be a very good suggestion to do in the future, that there is a review of these compliance documents that we fill out in the beginning of a project. And if it's not annual, then maybe biannual or so for those long projects. But I think annual would be a good idea. Over. Sorry, I captured a lot.
That's awesome. No, thank you, Jess. I'm also keeping an eye on the time, and we only have about a minute left. I want to quickly, Erica, let me turn it over to you, but please also go to the next question, at least in the doc, anytime over the next few hours, and just put your reflections on how ProWash and Scale might best engage in this space based on this conversation. So I'm going to just make a pitch for that as we're running out of time, but go ahead, Erica.
No, this is wonderful to hear from everybody. Definitely have things to say about greenhouse gas emissions and programming. I just want to touch upon that one in particular, although I have something to say about the donor piece as well, the multi-donor piece. For the most part, we are focusing on reducing greenhouse gas emissions in operations, not in programs. The idea that vulnerable farmers working at the margins of food insecurity and safety nets, their greenhouse gas emissions are quite negligible by comparison. And so this is a conversation that's being had. If we're talking, larger scale, perhaps development interventions in energy, et cetera, absolutely, we're working to reduce those greenhouse gas emissions, but really we're focused more on that the preponderance of emissions are associated with travel, with supply chains, and there are absolutely improvements within production of food and non-food items upstream. And so that is an ongoing conversation that we're not asking for those vulnerable farmers to be sort of shouldering reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, because frankly, it is by far negligible by comparison. So that's a conversation that would love to have as a further exploration with you all as well. Over.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would be fascinating and really helpful to kind of think through like where the focus is and ought to be. I think we're all back together, right, Julia? Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, so thanks everybody for joining on this one. I think in the next couple, I don't know if we're all together yet, but I think right now we should be all together. And then I just wanted to really thank people for participating in the breakout groups, your thoughts. We're going to follow up. Your thoughts and comments were super appreciated. And we will leave this document open for a couple of hours today for you to provide additional feedback. And we'll also send kind of a post-survey, a post-meeting survey where we'll elicit additional feedback. So please, if you didn't have time to provide feedback, please think about it. With that, I think maybe I can just do 1 to 2 minutes, if a summary of kind of high-level things that was discussed in the breakout group. So maybe I will turn it over to either Jen or Nicole, if you just want to describe one or two top line things that was discussed.
Sure, I can kick us off since it's fresh-ish in my mind. Um, so we had a really good conversation that focused mainly on questions around like pesticide use and the tools that one might use to kind of make the decisions about pesticide use, especially Jess brought up, you know, even though it doesn't happen all that often, when partners do need to use pesticides, for instance, with fall armyworm outbreaks, that when that's happened, the approval process had been quite slow, and wondered if there might be if things had improved in the years since they've had to do that kind of approval. And I think I saw that Erica would be very happy to talk to you more about that. And then there was a conversation around greenhouse gas emissions and tools to use there. Some of the tools are like too scientific, some are not scientific enough. And some, you know, conversation around that. And one of the things that I really appreciated at the end of that was this statement by Erica, which it totally makes sense to me, that the GHG piece is more focused on operations from the USAID side and less on sort of households and communities, and that the point is not to be asking vulnerable farmers to be shouldering the greenhouse gas emissions, responsibility or piece, and that this might be a really interesting topic for further discussion, which I agree with. Yeah, so that's kind of a recap.
Great, thank you so much, Jen. Really appreciate it. And if there are kind of people want to have additional comments or questions, please feel free to put in the notes or put in our chat. So with that, I don't know if Nicole, you can just do a couple minutes of Wash.
Yeah, thanks so much. And sorry, Wash Group, I didn't have a chance to thank you before the breakout room closed and we all got sent back to the main room. But we spent some time talking especially around fecal sludge management and the challenges around implementing those best practices. It was noted that oftentimes in emergencies, there's a lot of funding for short-term or kind of the first step, which is around constructing latrines for households and improving that sanitation coverage. But those longer term interventions that are critical for environmental safeguarding, such as fecal sludge management, there isn't perhaps the funding for that in the emergency space. So that's a big challenge of both thinking about, those short-term needs of latrine construction, but then longer term, how will the sludge be managed and so forth. And a good example, though, was given of the Rohingya response in Bangladesh, where a large fecal sludge management system was set up and also provided economic opportunities and fertilizer for the local area. We also discussed some of the considerations around using that. So, the testing that would be needed to make sure that it was safe for being used on food crops. I think another thing that came up was around space as well, around fecal sludge management. So that was a challenge. For some of the ways that ProWash and Scale should engage in this space, there was definitely we spoke around, capturing some of the lessons around environmental safeguards. So what has worked well and maybe why, or why, and what hasn't worked well and why not. There was also discussion around capacity strengthening. And I think this focus around transition as well. So you have the first, emergency response, but then some of these broader issues are needed to be addressed by development actors and government. So perhaps there's space in there for how we can dialogue between emergency and development and government partners around implementation of some of the safeguards. So capacity strengthening and partnership and coordination collaboration were also brought up. There was also mention of someone's using the NEAT tool, so we can dig further into that. So great. I think I'll conclude there, but welcome everyone to continue to put more ideas in our shared document.
Great. Thanks, Nicole, and thanks everyone for really contributing and really helping this discussion. I think I will put just one more in our chat document, I'll put a link to this. And we do, if you have any thoughts that come up throughout the day or in the next couple hours as you're thinking this through and you didn't have time, we welcome your input. And I know for some of the groups, maybe we didn't have as much a discussion on the third question on how ProWash and Scale can kind of best support. So we really appreciate any thoughts or inputs. So with that, I'll put the link in the chat. And after this meeting, we will also send to people a post event survey where we'll kind of request your input and thoughts on both these questions and kind of if you have any other additional thoughts or questions on ProWash and Scale's work plan or anything else that you wanted to share with us, we'd greatly appreciate your time and input on them. So with that, I know it's right about at the hour and we don't want to keep people longer. So thanks again for taking the time today out of your schedule to join with us. We really appreciate it. Thanks so much, Erica, for your great presentation. We really appreciate your thoughts and input on this. And we look forward to continuing this conversation moving forward. This is just the start of a conversation on this topic, and we do anticipate there'll be future conversations. So with that, I don't know. Thanks, everyone. I really appreciate your time and help on this.